Well, hi everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend and colleague Alfonso Rachel, and this is the Virtue Signal. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving holiday, in spite of the fact that the entire pillars of civilization are collapsing all around us. Zoe, I've got a problem with profanity. I don't have a problem with profanity. I've got a problem with profanity. Here's my problem. We live in an increasingly profane society. Every day just gets more vulgar and more coarse and so on, and F-bombs and S-cluster bombs and all the rest of the stuff's getting thrown around all over the place. And here's my problem with profanity. Not in the first-person stuff I do here, but in other related work and so on and so forth, it's like this profanity is kind of like a protein shell around a virus. And it has, to certain people, to a lot of people, the ring of truth. So here's my actual problem with profanity. If I want to make a piece of entertainment or something, and I want it to get to the people who need it rather than the people who don't need it, usually that's going to involve the kind of language that's pretty much in common usage everywhere, pretty much every day. And that's not the language that the people who watch this show use, or the people who are the members at billwhittle.com use. So this is my problem, and I've been wrestling this with this for a long time. I kind of decided to talk about it today because for my Moving Back to America show, there's this guy, white rapper named Samson, and he's just fantastic. Just utterly destroys the Biden administration. But it's like there's I don't know, 25, 30 F-bombs in that thing. And I'm going to bleep them all out for our audiences. But you know where I'm going with this? I think probably the best way I can put this dilemma is, I think George Carlin said, when he was talking about the 7 words you couldn't say on TV, I think he said something to the effect of, it's just hard for me to imagine a bunch of guys who are in a motorcycle gang, and one of them says to the other, "Excuse me, I have to go tinkle now." You know, it's so where do we come down on this? I mean, do you think it's justified within the bounds of that? Certainly profanity can be very, very lazy. Just sheer lazy writing and lazy comedy is all about shock value. But what do you think about this idea that it does bring a certain authenticity to things?
Well, something can be authentically awful.
Yeah, that's true.
Something can be authentically destructive. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people, we've talked about this before. It's like this rawness, or even when it's negative or when it's anger, as if these things are the real validators of reality. You know, how raw you could be, or how negative you could be, or how even profane. It's like, oh man, it's so real. It's like, well, there's another side to that realness too.
True.
I think the irony is that these things are viewed as adult language. I don't see anything adult about it, really.
No, it's great. That's a great point.
I tell you what, man, I at some point I was in middle school. I was in grade school at some point, despite how much school I ditched. I was in school, and kids curse way more than adults do. That's, from where I come from, it's like, man, we could have like sailors running out of the room. Okay, but how much we curse. Strong language, I don't see it as strong language. I see it as language that shows a lack of restraint. Restraint takes strength. And, when people are out there and they're cursing, it's like, and they don't care that, hey, kids may hear this sort of stuff. And then we wonder why kids grow up to be more profane than the generation that was before us.
No, that's a great point. And this is why it's a dilemma for me. Because on one hand, I would just wrap these messages in that protein shell, and that would reach the people who we need to reach. And there is such a thing as a church movie, There's nothing wrong with that, but it's very hard for that to cross over. One of the reasons I was talking about this guy who did this rap thing just a few minutes ago is because he's really good. He's just very, very good, and that profanity turns into a sense of like authenticity and passion and all the rest of it. Now, I completely agree that you don't have to have that in order to be authentic. But for example, if just to narrow it down, if I'm doing a story about a platoon of guys in Afghanistan, and and they when one of them really gets angry, says, "Oh, dang it," it's just not going to be there. And so this is my dilemma. I don't want to make things worse, and I don't want to be a part of the problem. I'd like to be part of the solution. But what I think has more weight for me is you got to get this message to people one way or another. And if you wrap it in something that they find digestible, then at least you're exposing them to ideas that they never would have been exposed to before, including ideas such as not using the F word every other word.
Sure, man. And, I even in my audio book, A Solid Right Cross, I talk about, like, if you're going to make a war movie or even like a cop drama or something like that, somebody, loses a limb or something like that in the midst of that, they're not going to be like, oh, golly gee, that's smarts.
That's right.
They're going to be, you're going to hear a bucket load. And that's real. If you, and the way these people cope when they're going to the service, and the way that they cope with each other and they bond and whatnot, you're going to hear some pretty salty language. And that's a real thing too. In that sense, you're not being frivolous with profanity.
There's the point.
Yeah, it's you don't want this just this foul mouth frivolity, just saying cursing, just for the sake of doing it. Sometimes, there is a certain effect that you're going for, but we talk about this. It's like who draws the line on that? Who does that? Who has the final stamp to be able to do such things? I think the real creativity, though, Bill, a real exercise of creativity is to be just as effective with drawing on language that can drive the point home just as well without sacrificing the integrity. It's like, okay, we talk about how the country is just so profane and whatnot. However, we're going to justify the means to this end in doing that. It's like, for me, I draw on the word of God. We talk about strong language. The strongest language in the world, in the universe was like, hey, let there be light. God didn't say, let there be effing light, and drew on that to give power to his speaking the universe into existence and laying down the foundation for
the darkness. That was the first words out of
right. When you talk about, the supreme architect, man, who's leading a big construction crew, it's like, look, man, I'm getting ready to lay this foundation. I want you to, he's talking to the superintendents or the foremans and say, hey, I want this effing done. It's like, no, he didn't have to say all that. It's like, they know who the mighty is, man. It's like, okay, man, we better go get this done and start laying these foundations, or doing our part to report that, hey, when he said that this is how he did it, this is how it's done. Don't F around with it. It's like, no, this is the schedule. This is how it's going to get done. That's it. So, the strong language, as the word says, like life and death is in the power of the tongue. Are you going to assume to be speaking something that's constructive and useful while using, destructive language? This isn't even useful demolition if you're going to do this. And even God does demolition work and he speaks demolition. However, even when he does it, he doesn't use destructive language or frivolously foul language to do it.
Yeah, I think that the word that really is the dividing line is gratuitous, right? Is like, are you just using profanity everywhere because you feel like it makes you sound like you said, powerful or an adult or shocking or whatever? Nothing particularly shocking to me anyway, given the circles I swim in.
Big staple singers.
Yeah, you really want to shock me? Use the word prestidigitation. Prestidigitation. That would impress me. So you can have a situation where your protagonist has the self-discipline to not swear, but I still find myself in a situation, and it's not just profanity either. It comes down to things like, well, if you just take a downtown scene, right? I mean, if you have a scene downtown, let's say you got a couple of cop characters and they're the good guys and they go to a strip club. That's what people do. And that's often what cops do. They don't go to the YMCA. And I'm not trying to be flip here, and I'm certainly not trying to ridicule a lack of profanity. I'm not doing that at all. I'm trying to, and obviously I'll read the comments on this. I'm trying to get a sense of the balance. And obviously some people are absolutely, completely offended by it to the degree where they're like, goodbye and goodbye with the membership. Other people, doesn't bother them at all. But I think it's the gratuitous quality of it. Because when you get right down to it, that word is it's a pretty multifunction verb, adjective, noun, pronoun. I mean, it's got a lot of versatility. But the reason I think that gratuitous is the word is because it is the go-to lazy word for people who want to express themselves. They think that if they use this word with enough emotion, then they're going to show people that they are really effing serious and not just serious, and so here I am in this a bit of a pickle.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's, as you use, and I forget this, and I've seen the video, man, and his rhymes are strong, man. It's got a strong beat. He's in pocket. If it's the same person I think of, I watched a little bit of it. I was listening
4613. It's a white guy with a mullet out in the field. He's fantastic.
Well, I don't. Okay, this is the guy that I saw had a big beard.
Man, I'll send you this guy. He's awesome.
Okay.
He dismantles the Biden administration.
We'll trade some videos,
okay,
man. Because there's another guy I think you'll really like him too. And like I said, his flow is strong. His phrasing is great. But I'm listening to all the profanity. I'm like, man, you're cheapening your message. And, when we talk about, okay, these are the people that we're going to relate with. We have to speak a certain language to relate to them. It's like, I understand, because, that's what we talk about. We're trying to relate to the culture, find a way to relate to, but relating to them with what is destroying them is counterproductive. It's like we're trying, it's very shallow. And the whole point is like, dude, dig deep. You got to dig a little bit deeper. How can we be creative and how can we really, even when putting together a military campaign, it's not just a point of, okay, we got all the big guns. Let's just send the guys in there and just, guns race. No, man, you have to calculate. Even the word of God talks about this. When you set up a war campaign, you have to calculate how this is going to be done. What are acceptable losses to you and so on and so forth. This stuff is laid out in the word. So even in this, you have to calculate, okay, and you're going to have to dig deep to minimize casualties, maximum result, and maximum yield and stuff like that. You can't just do these things willy-nilly and just say, I'm just speaking from raw emotion. You don't send your guys in there with just raw emotion. They got to have a plan, and have to be able to execute this thing as good as possible so folks have a better chance of going home and you can take that field. And in doing this, it's the same thing. You got to dig deep, man. So I didn't listen to the whole thing. I got enough of the point. And, but all that to your point, man, it's just a point of, if you're going to do this, you're trying to relate. I understand that you're trying to speak the language and so on and stuff. But if you're speaking the language of destruction and speaking the same language as keeping these people in a hole, you're not really helping anybody. You're really just getting something off your chest and assuming that everybody else is a part of it. And it's just a part of destruction, really.
The counter argument to that would be, yes, they're living in a profane and vulgar hole, and they're covered with sewage and all the rest of it. And yes, we want to raise them up and so on, but they're not coming up. They're not hearing it. They're not tuning into. They're not reading Heritage Foundation pamphlets. They're not. And so the counter argument would be, if you've got people who are down in the sewers and you're trying to bring them up, because they're not coming up on their own. This is the entire point. I wouldn't even have brought it up otherwise, because if everybody was, had their act together, wouldn't have to be dealing with this. But when you got people living down in the sewers and you want to get them out of the sewers, you have to go into the sewers to get them. And when you do that, you pick up the beautiful bouquet of fragrances that come with the sewer and all the rest of it. Doesn't mean you have to stand there. It doesn't mean you have to kick it up or stir it around anymore than you need to. But if you are going down there to get people, and you go down there in a white suit, when you come out, it's not going to be white suit anymore. You're not going to look like Pat Boone on the way out. And to me, that seems like a worthwhile trade.
Indeed, but we want to have a catalytic approach to it. You know what I'm saying? It's like you got one wants to go in and they want to make these changes. But you got to be careful that you don't exactly become what it is that you went in to change. Like sometimes I hear, people on the right say, man, we got to learn how to fight just as dirty, as they do. It's like, no, man, you want to keep the high ground. One, it's a better vantage point anyway to have the high ground. And, as, the word says, man, careful not to cast your pearls before swine. They'll drag you under and they will destroy you. You don't want to become part of that. I think it was, Mark Twain who paraphrased that and basically saying, I'm not trying to call these people idiots or anything like that, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like, you don't want to go down that road, man, because they'll beat you with experience. You'll end up getting dragged into their world and you'll get conquered. Even where, as far as the word of God, is concerned, the word says his Holy One will not see decay. So even when Jesus died, he still did not become like one of the dead. He was in his tomb. He went to minister to the prisons in hell. He went to Sheol. However, even though he went there, he didn't become like them. He died, but he didn't become like the dead. Instead, he made the dead like the living. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we're trying to do. He didn't become this foul, rotting corpse. The Holy One did not see decay. So he didn't become like them. Totally. He became like us in that we die. But once he became dead, he did not remain like the dead. He turned the dead back into the living. So that's what we're trying to do. We want to be able to go in there and not become mucked up with the profanity and stuff like that. We want to still be able to stay clean. That way we can bring them into what they, bring them out of Egypt, so to speak. They don't want to be suffering there. It's like, okay, well, come on, man. Don't make me like you. You become like this.
I thought this would clear things up for me, but it's actually made it worse. Just to close this, you mentioned Mark Twain. I don't have this almost exactly right. By the way, Mark Twain was famous for cursing. Now, I don't think it's 21st century cursing, but he was way out of the line on the standards of when he lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So much so that his wife was constantly on him about it. And he once said, occasionally profanity will provide a comfort that's denied even to prayer. And I guess all I'm saying is, if you've ever whacked your thumb with a hammer, you know that there's something very, very, very deep that connects base emotions like aggression or pain with a verbal response, and I don't know what that link is exactly, but it's certainly there. And one of the funniest things of really in the whole culture is watching somebody smash their finger and then trying to get that same satisfaction by not using those words. There's a great scene in a Christmas Story. I don't know if you know the movie with Ralphie, like the little kid. He's So his dad, Darren McGavin, is just wonderful. He's down in the basement trying to fix something, and you can just hear these sounds. It's like and they're covering their ears, and it's like, I don't know. There's something almost like that knee-jerk reaction, literal knee-jerk reaction when somebody taps you on the knee with a rubber mallet, which I do recreationally. I just go up and down on a bus if I'm able to tap them on the knee. But it's like an automatic release of pressure somehow, and maybe that's what drives so much of it in terms of the superfluousness, the superfluity of.
I'll take it.
Losing it today. No, I don't know. It's probably just made up a word. Sounds good. The superfluity of it. So maybe it's just connected to the fact that it kind of comes naturally with pain and anger and rage, and we live in a world that's filled with pain and anger and rage.
Oh, totally, man. I mean, I think Yosemite Sam, he was miffed at Bugs Bunny. And that stuff is hilarious. You hear that stuff, and you just hear these people censoring themselves. That stuff's hilarious. And I think of the beatings that the prophets and the Lord Himself took. It's like I don't imagine when the Lord was getting the licks put to him. He was just shooting out a whole bunch of every profanity in the Hebrew language or Greek or Aramaic, or just speaking any language that he could start. I mean, he knows them all. I'm pretty sure if he could have, he would have cursed in every language on earth. But it's not recorded that he did. I don't know any of the prophets that did. And once again, it's just that show of restraint. But I get what you're saying, man. When I was trying to go, work as a healthcare worker, one of the things that you learn is that, pain makes people angry. Okay, you're gonna deal with some very angry people. So pain is definitely gonna be tied to anger. Fear is tied to anger. Somebody scares, the snot out of you, man, and you gonna start cursing and stuff like that. It just happens. It's a reflex. And you're ready to fight. You might throw a F-bomb or you might throw a punch, one or two. Yep. And it's understandable, man. And that, now just really quick, man, this is the funny thing about movie making. We're trying to make the movies believable. That's the irony about making movies. You try to make them believable, plausible. This is what a person would do in a real life situation while expecting people to suspend disbelief. We do these things in movies and try to promote them as fiction, but at the same time, we're trying to have an effect that will cause people to behave a certain way in reality. So it's one of those things where as entertainers, movie makers, or content creators, it's like, okay, how do we balance this out where we're trying to let people know what are we trying to do? Do we want to make this as realistic as possible while expecting people to suspend disbelief and justify the things that we'll put in it, with the profanity and whatnot, and then not expect people to emulate that somehow while complaining about how profane the culture is getting while saying, yeah, but we're trying to deliver a positive message. We hear that in a rap game a lot. I'm speaking a message of effing positivity and all that sort of stuff. It's like, okay, I'm not seeing how that's working. Or even, whatever genre it is, man. You got these same people saying that we're trying to be positive and spread love in the world, effing love and all that sort of stuff. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working.
No, I guess not. I guess, maybe what you're saying is you can just kind of seduce them out of it rather than full frontal nudity. Maybe you just show a little bit of shoulder, something like that.
There you go.
Sweater, that kind of thing. And I will just close this episode by saying, on behalf of millions of people like me, and I guarantee you there's somebody watching this video who knows who I'm talking about. I don't know the name of the person. But whoever the artist was who first came up with the idea of using all of these different characters to represent swearing, when you see like it written out, it's like it'll be on the thumbnail for this show. But it's like the ampersand and then the dollar sign and then that's just pure genius. You look at that once and it's like, oh, that makes sense to me.
Yep.
That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal, which is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. It's a happy little family and it could use to be a little bit bigger. If you want to find some friends that you haven't met yet, might be worth your time to just go over there and take a look. We've got a members forum that's real active and I never cease to be amazed by the quality of the people we have and the level of intelligence. I don't know what they have to do with me at all, but nevertheless, there they are. So it's there for you if you want it. For Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time here on The Virtue Signal.